Good afternoon and welcome to the third concurrent session of the day, Ask Me Anything, a Q&A with Nelson Lauver. In case some of you are joining us for the first time and weren't able to listen to Nelson's incredibly heartfelt and touching keynote presentation prior to this meeting, I will do a quick introduction again just to give you some background and context on his story, but then we'll dive straight into answering your questions. Nelson was determined to overcome illiteracy forced upon him by dyslexia and an educational system that chose to label him as unteachable. Nelson had dreams for his booming radio voice, but the inability to read was stopping him from meeting his goals. At 29 years old, he sought help through an occupational rehabilitation program. Through professional and exhaustive evaluations, it was determined that as a means of compensating for his reading and writing disability, he had unknowingly fine-tuned his listening and speaking skills to extraordinary levels. The little boy who teachers had given up on was actually quite brilliant. During rehabilitation, he purchased a simple word processor to practice his letter and sentence structure. Not knowing how and what to type, he started to hunt and peck short stories about himself, friends, and the small Pennsylvania community around him. He produced many fine short stories that soon became the basis for his CD, The American Storyteller. Today, The American Storyteller has become part of a nationally syndicated radio program featuring Nelson and his gifted voice. A syndication that everyone said could not grow, let alone survive, is now heard on 68 stations throughout the Midwest. Nelson has said no questions are off limits, so if you have any, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We do have a few, several questions that came in during his keynote. We also received a lot of really lovely messages for Nelson from those of you who are deeply touched by his story, and we appreciate those as well. So getting started here, let's start with the first question that came in for you. It's a multi-part question here. Do you have advice on how to assist college-age students with suspected dyslexia issues? Due to college policies, we cannot outright ask students if they have dyslexia or other issues that make reading and writing difficult.
Sure. If you suspect that you have students with dyslexia, have a speaker come in. Time and time again, I would go out and I would talk, and professors would make it mandatory that, or not mandatory, but the students would get extra credit, of course, for coming to the thing, and I'd sign a little slip that, yeah, they were here. And over the years, there were so many kids that came to me and said, "You just described me. This is what's going on with me." And so often they just don't realize why they struggle so much with reading and writing. They just think, well, I'm not very smart. And have a speaker come in, have little talks about dyslexia, do an indirect marketing thing. Do you struggle to read and write, or is spelling difficult for you, or and do it that way. I know that you can't come right out and ask them in college, but get creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Another person asked, was the deep brain stimulator for the dyslexia, or was it needed as a result of the beatings?
It was needed as a result of the injury. And the injury, it was a twofold thing. The injury created different memory through the nerves as to where the muscle wanted to be, because it wanted to go somewhere that it could find more comfort. And that was, to put me over here. And at the same time, that familial tremor that is in my family, just like I said, exploded because of the stress and the anxiety of, having your head turned over here, and you want to fight to bring it straight, because it's not very attractive. And so no, it wasn't for the dyslexia. It was for the injury and the tremor that the injury caused.
Next question. What are some of the techniques you recommend to encourage a college student with dyslexia and low confidence?
Well, let's set them up for success, first of all. Let's give them some examples of other people who have struggled with the types of things they're struggling with. For instance, Jay Leno, everyone knows Jay Leno. Jay Leno is dyslexic. There's a million of us out there. But technology, a lot of folks that I talk with are like, no, I don't want them to use technology because then they don't really learn, they're using the technology. Well, the same argument was made about the calculator. My father was the first guy in town to have a calculator. And when he showed it off at the local restaurant, there were people who thought, this was predicting the rapture. It would be rolling in by Friday. Technology. I've had so much success with technology, and I have written 2 books with using technology. Everything I write is with technology, and I'm not a paid spokesman for Grammarly. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Grammarly.com. I love it. Now it costs me $120, $30, $40, $50 a year. I'm not sure, but Grammarly is a writing assistant software, and then I can mash up my voice to text from my MacBook, and also then for editing I can listen back, text to speech. So I can go through text probably just as fast as anybody doing this, with speech and listening. Once I learned to read with my ears and write with my voice, it's pretty hard to keep up with me.
Actually, I was curious with you mentioning how helpful technology has been, and you just mentioned a few. Are there any other technologies in particular that have helped you with your dyslexia, or is those 2 things might be?
Boy, I'll tell you, my MacBook, which has the voice to text, text to voice, and Grammarly, those are the 2, the MacBook and the Grammarly. And there may be other platforms out there besides Grammarly. And there is a fellow who's, all over tech all the time. And I'm sure there's people out there that know his name. I've met him a couple times at conferences. And when it comes to tech for learning differences, he's right on top of it. And I can't think of his name right off the bat. Somebody will type it.
I was going to say, if anyone knows or thinks they know who you're speaking about,
He's
feel free
the
to type
guru.
it.
Yeah.
Q&A, I'll announce it to everyone if I see that coming through. Next one, we had somebody understandably asking if that teacher who so terribly abused you faced any legal consequences.
There was a deal made where he left education. I believe it was a thing where he just bowed out of his job, and then, there were no consequences for him. However, he did become a member of the school board in later years, the local school board.
Wow.
And I personally, in a very nice way, put quite a bit of pressure on him, and he did resign.
I bet you did. I'm glad you did. Wow. Let's see. Somebody asked, is there anything you wish you had known or understood earlier on that would have helped? Perhaps.
Yes.
Okay.
When I was a kid in school, I remember my sixth grade teacher. I adored her. I loved her. And I wanted to really try for her. And she kept me in one time at recess and she asked me to take a test that I had just failed because I just scribbled in the answers. It was multiple choice and I just checked whatever box. And then she gave me the test orally and I got everyone correct because even though I wasn't, I couldn't read and write, she was a very oral teacher and she discussed everything. So I knew all the answers and it was a quiz more than a test. And I think there were like 10 questions. And she said to me, Nelson, you are very, very smart. Why did you just get all these answers right? And yet you got all the answers wrong on the test when you had to fill it out. And I said, well, because listening is easy and reading and writing is hard. And in my mind, I always thought, people said school is hard. Everything that is worthwhile, I grew up in this Pennsylvania Dutch German community. If it's not hard, it's not worth it. Hard, hard, hard. And anything that's easy is taking the easy way out and you're lazy. So listening, getting it right was easy. And I thought it was the easy way out. And I just wish I would have known then that I was allowed to use those skills, that it was okay for me to use techniques that were easy for me. I wish I would have known that.
Yeah, absolutely. This next one, it's part comment, part question, but I'd like to read the whole thing here. First off, I've never been an overly emotional person, but your story literally brought tears to my eyes. Even though nothing much was known about dyslexia when you were a child, what happened to you is completely uncalled for. To my question, as a math teacher, what can I do to help dyslexic students? Also, our online teaching department asks us to avoid the use of writing in red. Is that somehow related to dyslexia?
Well, I don't know about the writing in red. There's always controversy about does this work, does that work, does this, that, or the other thing work. There's a font out called Open Dyslexia. There are people who say there is no scientific evidence that this works. It works for me. Putting a yellow cellophane over a piece of paper that you're reading text off of, there's no scientific evidence that it works. It works for me.
Wow.
And maybe someone says, now I'll tell you, if you're writing red on black, if you're mixing red and black, like there's black text on the page and then there's red, it is very difficult for me to look at red and black together. It just flashes all over the place. And so maybe that's what they're talking about. I never heard anybody say, don't use a red pen. But I think what it comes down to is what works for that student. Does this certain font work for that student? And if it does, use it. Does blowing up the type larger and double spacing it, does that work? Use it. Ask the kid, just like my teacher asked me, what works?
Mm-hmm.
And if the kid says, well, standing on my head and sticking my finger in one ear works, do it.
Somebody asked, I like this one, what are your greatest sources of joy?
in the world of Myers-Briggs, if any of you are familiar with that. I am an ENFJ. And that said, people are people.
Let's see, next one. How would you recommend proceeding as a parent with children who are struggling and the school system is overlooking them because they are able to achieve with their coping mechanisms, or maybe they're struggling with their, let me read that one more time. How would you recommend proceeding as a parent with children who are struggling and the school system is overlooking them because they are able to achieve, maybe they're not able to achieve without their coping mechanisms?
Mm-hmm. The first thing I would do is I would claim to myself that I am an advocate for my kid. There are two kinds of kids who have learning differences: kids who make it and kids who don't. And 9 times out of 10, the kids who make it are kids who have a parent. It's almost always a mom who is a super advocate. So how do you become a super advocate? You must know the law and your rights inside and out. In the world of business, we have a saying: you can either pound the table and make a whole lot of noise, or you can pound the facts. And I can tell you from personal humiliation that pounding the table will, and making a lot of noise, will get you nowhere. Pounding the facts and being well spoken and diplomatic, articulate your argument, form your argument, practice your argument, make a compelling argument. Study the rules, the laws, your rights, and you're very powerful. Do not go in there, pound the table, and hang up 4 or 5 administrators and teachers and burn down the school, and it won't help you. Pound the facts.
Perfect. Let's see. Next one is, could you mention the name of the nonprofit you are presenting for? I have raised 3 children with ADHD, and both my son and husband were dyslexic. And I think my granddaughter has dyslexia, but her mother and maternal grandparents refuse to consider the possibility. I want to support financially such an organization as this one.
Well, it is Different Not Defective Incorporated. And with me winding down, the nonprofit is also winding down. We will continue a very localized mission, and you may find this interesting. One of the great challenges over the years is reaching dads, moms. I call them momvicates, these great advocates. We have really struggled in dyslexia awareness to reach dads, and oftentimes because the dads are dyslexic and they blame themselves. So locally here, we are going to continue our mission. While I won't be getting on planes and trains anymore and traveling across the country, we will be going out locally. And, we talked in the beginning about how do you reach people? And I said, be creative. So we bought a car. We bought a classic car, the last year of the Cartier Lincoln Continental. And we are going to go to car shows. This is where dads live. And it's our back door in to dads. And we're going to use the car shows, classic cars, mechanics, working with your hands as a conversation starter. Because I'll tell you, I've been at this long enough that within 10 minutes of talking to someone, I know if they're dyslexic. So, that is one way we're going to be creative. And
Oh, yeah, very creative.
but if you want to donate money, donating to our nonprofit probably won't do a whole lot outside of our local area. The International Dyslexia Association is a very good organization, and I would suggest you make a nice donation to those folks.
Perfect. Thank you. My dad loves a good car show, so that's a great, great idea you guys have there. Another question we have is, so I know you mentioned the one instructor, or at least one teacher had adapted how they taught to you by reading the quiz out loud and letting you answer verbally. Yeah. Were there any other techniques that instructors worked with you that worked well to help you with that, with reading? And
no, other than something that helped me get through, I was sort of putting in my time and trying to get through, hoping they would give me a diploma just to get rid of me, which they did, but just being decent to me. There were a number of teachers who were just extremely kind to me and took an interest in me and saw something in me that other teachers didn't. And that was greatly appreciated and really made a difference. Now, in the modern era, of course, my teachers back then just didn't know what to do with me. But you know what to do educationally. Remember those kind words, and remember the incredible power of encouragement. You may not see instant gratification right now, but 25 years from now, that kid may be sitting around a dinner table telling your story of how you help them. Encouragement.
Do you think there are any specific norms or trends within the classroom that help contribute to young students feeling too ashamed or nervous to speak up about their own learning difficulties?
Yeah. Remember that oftentimes curriculum is created by atypical minds for atypical minds. And when you see a kid that is not responding well to that curriculum, you may be seeing a kid who is neurodiverse. And, can you start working with that kid in other ways to find out what does work for them? I had a mom down south. She sent me an email about her son. She said, it's just awful. My son barely got through high school, and finally we got him into community college. And, the first semester he failed every class except one. Tell me what to do. I said, well, start by telling me about the class he didn't fail. And let's see what worked there, and let's go from there. Kind of lost track of what the question was, but I hope that answered it.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Thank you. Another one, you had mentioned in your story last session about how it was a lot easier for you to learn math when you're at the gas station versus in school.
Yeah.
Do you mind explaining a little bit more about why it was
Oh,
easier for you?
absolutely. At the gas station, we all have five senses. At the gas station, everything had a smell, it had a taste, it had a sound, it had a visual, you know, uh, attached to it. Changing oil in a car, I could smell the oil, the smell of the cardboard box that the filter came in, the sound of the cash register keys clicking. Uh, it was so much different than someone telling you to look at a book. I could associate the price of everything with other senses that I had: smell, taste. At the gas station, there was we sold ice cream and candy bars and soda, and all kinds of stuff, and I was able to equate that. And one of the cool things about learning with money was this system of 100 and tens and ones, 1%. And I picked up percentages instantly. If you look at a dollar bill and 1 penny, that's 1% of 100, or a dime is 10% of 100. If we take a quarter of that, that's 25% of 100. And it just worked for me because it was all hands on and it used all my senses. And that worked.
Yeah, it sounds like a very different experience than a lot of times you get in the classroom.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Somebody asked if your dyslexia is any different when it comes to reading math. They said, do you have problems reading equations in math? What about graphs of functions? Do you visualize those like someone without dyslexia?
Well, I don't know if I visualize those. I've thought about visualization a lot and how I use visualization. Uh, I definitely think in pictures. When it comes to math, I love visualization. I love graphs. I am a numbers person. Uh, Being dyslexic, at the heart of everything, I'm an entrepreneur. Many dyslexics are entrepreneurs. Uh, but like, it's definitely more difficult to read out, like if Susie goes to the store and she has $1, and that's harder to read out. But if someone reads that to me, or if I hear that, well, then I'm going to all the pictures that are associated with that. And, I see it all. Whereas if I'm reading it, sight reading, that's pretty tough.
Let's see. How did you maintain the motivation to continue attending school when you were amid so much negativity and abuse from some of your teachers along the way?
My parents.
Oh, okay.
My folks just they encouraged me tremendously. They did not know a lot of what happened at school because I didn't go running home and telling them that, hey, I got beat up today because I'm a bad kid. But my father, oh, he encouraged me just constantly. I mean, I never remember my father saying anything critically negative, unkind, in an unkind way. Even when he was upset, if he criticized you, it was always in a positive way. The worst thing, and my sister and I agree on this, my brother is deceased. The worst thing we could hear out of our dad, I would have rather had a beating from him, and he never hit me in my entire life. Now, mom, but dad, all he had to do was look at you and say, I'm very disappointed. And, but what was the question?
It was how you maintain motivation just going to
Oh,
school through all of that. Yeah.
my father enlisted in World War II and was not able to finish school because he felt that duty to his country. And my mother had to quit school to help support her family. And what my parents wanted more than anything was for their three children to have a high school diploma. And like I said, I figured it out that there was a very good chance because I had seen it with other kids who were ahead of me that they would give me a diploma to get rid of me. And I almost did quit. And, but then I chose to finish out my last year and I got that diploma for what it's worth.
What has helped you deal with such significant childhood trauma as an adult? Is there anything that you've done to help with that?
Yes, in Lewistown, Pennsylvania, near where I grew up, there is a leather chair in a psychologist's office that I'm pretty sure still has a perfect imprint of my backside in it. I spent, as part of my vocational rehabilitation, I spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in that chair talking about things I never wanted to talk about and talking about the anger and what it was doing to me, and it was killing me. And I got my head on straight, and that really really helped. I needed professional help, and I didn't want to go for it, but OVR said you have to. If you're part of this program, this is what you need. So I begrudgingly did, and I'm really really glad that I did. Today I still use a lot of things that I learned, meditation, self-hypnosis. Uh, I've had a hard time being an ENFJ, if that means anything to anyone in the audience. I've had a hard time accepting that I'm allowed to do things for myself. And that's why, I've had to ease in to retirement and taking care of myself because I felt so compelled to get a message out there so that other kids wouldn't go through anything even remotely close to what I went through.
I
So
remember
that's helped me.
I remember when we spoke earlier, you were also talking about the importance of just being able to let go of anger, which
Oh, yeah.
really resonated.
Yeah. For instance, the gentleman who injured me so badly, I don't hate him. I don't. I don't hold any anger toward him. I'm not going to rush out and have dinner with him if he calls tomorrow. I really don't want a whole lot to do with him. I do see him from time to time. He avoids me for the most part, and he doesn't want to talk to me. He's very uncomfortable. He's never apologized, but I think he's quite ashamed. And there's no point in me rubbing that in any further. Uh, this is the life I have. These are the cards I've been dealt, and I've just got to make the most of it. I don't want to have this brain surgery, but I have to. If my life's going to be what I want it to be, I have to do it.
So you'd mentioned meditation a moment ago. They wanted to know, how did meditation help you? And did you combine yoga with meditation?
I didn't combine yoga with meditation. I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't know much about yoga other than what I've heard, and I've always heard extremely positive things about it. Meditation just allowed me to relax, and I didn't realize until I started meditating how tense and how uptight and how unrelaxed I was, until I got into that and started to feel it, dissipate. And what a difference. What a huge difference.
Sparked a good bit of interest. Somebody else was wondering how often you meditate, and does meditation help you accept some of the hard things you've been through and reduce some of your angers?
Oh, absolutely. I meditate every day. I meditate to go to sleep. Some days, if I'm having a particularly hard day, uh, with the deep brain stimulator malfunctioning, what was happening to me is I was getting shocked in different parts of my body, mostly my foot. And I never knew when it was coming. And it was like, if you grew up in the country, it was sort of like touching the electric fence, not to that great of a degree, or I would suppose it was like being tased. I've never been tased, thank God. But I don't think nearly as strong, but it was a joke. And I was really, tightening up. My jaw was real tight. And I would just lie down. And I always use guided meditation, and I find all kinds of it online. YouTube has tons and tons of it. There's a guy named Michael Sealy who has millions and millions of subscribers. I find his stuff to be very, very useful. So yeah, it has helped me enormously.
Perfect. Somebody said that they were also abused by teachers, not as severely as you, but the way she coped with it was acting silly outside of class. And she was wondering if you had any coping mechanisms when you were growing up experiencing this.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I could not accept that my I felt like some of my teachers hated me, and I could not accept that someone hated me. And we had a rule in our house. You know, we had three rules. My father had three rules. Don't leave the house unless your shoes are shined. Uh, Always hold the door for a lady. And there is no room in our hearts for hate. We can't hate other people. So I created sort of a monster at my school, in school, to blame it on. I imagined this icky green creature that tormented me, tormented the teachers, and made the teachers do what they were doing. And I knew what I was doing. And I suppose it was maybe a form of meditation, even. I knew what I was doing. I wasn't delusional, but it was a way to transfer that thought of being hated, or that I might hate. And that's how I coped with it.
What about, can you explain what the words on the page look like to you and how you're able to learn to process them after your dyslexia diagnosis?
Just utter confusion. Now, one thing I learned very, very quickly was larger print is not as confusing as smaller print. And if it is double spaced, it's much easier. Putting different colors of acetate cellophane over it, and perhaps one day yellow works better, maybe the next day green works better. I almost read, sight read. I don't, I'm about to use a double negative. I almost never read anything solely by sight anymore. If I do read by sight, it's not more than a paragraph. I sight read at the same time that I listen, and that helps me a lot. To answer your question, those things help stop the confusion. And the confusion, to me, to best describe it, I've always said it's like taking a printed page of text and putting a window screen over it, and then having someone move the window screen around while you're trying to read it. And that hasn't changed that much. What has changed is I know that there are different ways of reading. I can calm down. I don't have to get so upset or angsty about what the page says. I'll figure it out.
All right, and then one last question here before we close. Let me make sure I'm not, actually see if we can get two in. I just saw another coming in. Dealing with difficult, challenging, the font is actually very small in these chats, so it is a little hard to read. Dealing with difficult, challenging learners or struggling students, I try to control myself because of my job rather than medication. May it be a good way, or may it blow up when the levels of anger get high?
Ask me that question again.
Yeah, let me ask one more time. And actually, we can also have this one sent to you via email too, if it might be one we can follow up with afterwards. Another question we had was, what do you wish teachers today would know about students who are struggling with learning disabilities?
These kids are smart. They are smart. They think differently than, the atypical learner, and they probably think differently than you do. And if you don't understand them, and I hesitate in using this word, but I'm going to use it anyhow. Your ignorance is not malicious. If you care about them, your ignorance is simply innocent. And that's okay. I mean, we've all dealt with well-meaning people who want the best for us, but don't understand. Your challenge is to try to figure them out. What makes them tick? And honestly, if you can gain their trust, they'll tell you what makes them tick, and you'll figure out a lot. Now, do you want to do that question again? The one?
Yes, I can read that one more time. Dealing with difficult, challenging learning or struggling students. So if you're dealing with students who have trouble learning or are struggling, I believe this instructor said they're trying to control themselves because of the job rather than medication. May it be a good way to blow up when the levels of angers get high. I think they're asking a question about how, if they have a challenging student and it's difficult to teach with them, how can they help control their angers or irritation at those students?
Right. Well, I think that is a great time when you need to lean on people that you really, really trust, a colleague, um, or even like I did, go and get some counseling, because I am sure, my number one goal was to make sure no teacher wanted me back the next year. And I pushed buttons. No kid wants to look like the dumb kid, and they will push your buttons to keep, so that they can look like the bad kid instead of the dumb kid. And man, that must be incredibly challenging. And when you find that happening, try to understand it as best you can. And if you are really struggling, again, lean on a colleague, uh, talk it out with someone, you know, go get some counseling to figure this out, because when you help yourself in this situation, I kind of have a feeling that, without sounding too wacky or too way out there, that you may just be getting a message from the universe saying, this kid that's driving you nuts is a kid that's going to change the world, and is a kid that needs your help.
That's such a good message. Thank you so much, Nelson. This has been an absolute pleasure to spend the last 2 hours with you. We really do appreciate it. We'll make sure, you had so many nice messages that came in. I'm sure you saw some of them, but we'll compile those, send those to you after this as well, just so you can hang on to them as your last big presentation, potentially before your well-deserved retirement. So thank you. We appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you.
Our true pleasure. The next concurrent sessions are going to begin at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can view the chat for session meeting room links, or access the conference website for a complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team. You can view a quick 5-minute demonstration and be entered to win an hourly giveaway, your choice of a smart pen, standing desk, or $100 Amazon gift card.